Friends, have you ever watched a courtroom go completely silent, every eye fixed, every breath held, as something unexpected unfolds? Imagine a moment when the judge, known for firmness, puts aside the gavel and reads a letter from the defendant, one letter that changes the air in the room forever. What if I told you that in one extraordinary hearing, the entire court stopped, breathless, because of words nobody expected, from a person everyone assumed had no chance? You might think you know how justice works, but what happened next challenges everything you believe. The moment began when the defendant, weak in voice but strong in truth, handed a handwritten note to the judge. What was inside that note? What was it about the defendant's past, the hidden secrets, the plea for mercy that had the room pivoting in stillness? And why did the judge's reading of that letter cause spectators, lawyers, even the prosecutor to lean forward as if hearing a revelation for the first time? Today, we're going to walk through the hallway into that high-ceilinged courtroom, hear the subtle shuffle of papers, the sharp intake of breath, and we'll feel the weight of those words together. You're going to wonder, did the defendant's simple letter shift the course of justice? Was it a cry for forgiveness, a confession, or a truth bomb that shattered assumptions? And as you sit with me right now, consider this. How far does mercy stretch when the words on a page confront the human in a defendant's shoes? Are we prepared to listen when someone dares to rewrite their story in front of a whole court of strangers? This is more than a case. It's a quiet storm in a formal space. And by the end, you will know why every person in that room paused. Friends, you won't believe what happens next. But stay with me, because what unfolds is not just legal drama, it's a deeply human moment. And at the end, I'll ask you something. I'll ask you to reflect, to share, to dive into a deeper truth about justice and compassion. Now, let's step inside the room. Let's meet the judge, the defendant, the letter that made time stop. The judge presiding over this case is Frank Caprio, a man whose reputation goes beyond the bench. Known for fairness, for weaving humanity into his rulings, he entered this courtroom with years of service and an aura of respect. On the morning of this hearing, the polished wood of the bench glinted under overhead lights. The gallery was filled with onlookers, family members, press, the courtroom staff, and ordinary citizens curious about public justice in motion. In the defendant's seat sat a person of quiet appearance, whose arrival sparked little fanfare but held profound significance. We'll call him Michael for the sake of this story. Michael looked frail, shoulders slightly slumped, his eyes scanning the room as though seeking an anchor in unfamiliar territory. He was an ordinary man once, with ordinary dreams, until something catastrophic happened, something that brought him into this judicial arena where lives pivot. The case itself began months ago. Michael had been accused of something serious, something that threatened his family, his future, his identity. The charges weighed heavily, the evidence stacked, and the expectation for many was that the judge's decision would follow a predictable path. But beneath the formal documents, beneath the witness statements, there was a story invisible to most, one filled with regret, transformation, and a letter that nobody expected. Before the hearing opened, there was the flutter of a docket, the rustle of legal pads, the sharp knock of the gavel. The courtroom attorneys cleared their throats. The prosecutor's voice echoed as they laid out the case. Michael had breached trust, violated rules, and the state demanded accountability. His defense attorney delivered a brief speech of mitigation. He asked the court to take into account Michael's prior record, his personal hardships, his family's reliance on him. Yet even that speech could not prepare the court for what was about to happen. As the anticipation grew, the spectators leaned in. You could sense the collective environment shift from detached observation to engaged tension. What would Michael say? What could he possibly produce that would arrest the court's routine? The judge's face remained calm, inscrutable. Yet his eyes tracked every motion, every syllable in the room. Then came the moment. Michael reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. He extended it toward Judge Caprio, his hand trembling just slightly. The courtroom hushed. Everyone watched. What was in that letter? Why had Michael brought it now? Why had no one seen it before? And so we arrive at the threshold of the central conflict. We know the players, the judge, the defendant, the courtroom audience. We know the setting, a formal space where justice is supposed to feel predictable. But underlying that structure is uncertainty. What hidden truth awaited revelation? What secret would upend expectations? Stay with me because we will unpeel the layers of the letter, discover the hidden past, the pain, the confession, and you will see how every person in that courtroom braced for a moment they did not see coming. Michael's voice was soft when he began to speak, but steady. He addressed the court and then asked Judge Caprio to please read what he had written. The room quieted further. No one interrupted. The prosecutor sat forward, eyebrows raised. The gallery leaned in. The defense attorney nodded subtly to signal the judge. Then, the judge opened the letter. The first paragraph revealed something unexpected. Michael admitted to wrong. He described his mistake not as a cold violation, but as a desperate act born of fear, survival, and regret. He confessed to betraying trust, yes, but he also explained the chain of events that brought him to this moment. Job loss, mounting debts, sleepless nights, and a call from his daughter that changed everything. He wrote how the responsibility of being a father weighed on him when the world collapsed around him. As the judge read further, Michael revealed a secret he had hidden until that moment. Years ago, before the public charges, he had witnessed something horrific. A family tragedy, a loss, a moment of helplessness that scarred his soul. He didn't bring it up earlier because shame had sealed his lips, but in this letter he laid it bare. The accident, the unresolved guilt, the sleepless nights listening to his child call for him. He explained that the legal trouble was only the tip of a deeper emotional iceberg. The courtroom's collective breath caught when the judge's expression softened. The prosecutor's face shifted from stern to reflective. The gallery fell completely silent. You could hear the ticking clock echo. The letter went on to say that Michael had tried to make amends. He started volunteering at a local shelter. He paid off his small debts. He reached out to the person he had wronged, offering restitution and apology. None of that fully erased his mistake, but he wrote that the act that landed him here was not the sum of his character. He asked the court to see the person behind the act. Questions raced through everyone's minds. Could justice accommodate redemption? Would the court look past the violation to the man's transformation? Did Michael's hidden trauma explain his misconduct? Was repentance enough to shift the trajectory of a case that public opinion had already decided? Then came the paragraph that brought some in the room to tears. Michael described a letter he received from his young daughter, asking, "Daddy, when will you come home?" He wrote that he had failed to show up, that he had let her down, and that every time he looked into her eyes, he saw his reflection as broken. He begged the court, not for leniency because he was innocent, but for a chance to continue healing, to earn trust again, to rebuild the life he had almost lost. The judge paused. He closed the letter briefly, looked up at the gallery, then resumed reading. The weight of those words hung in the air. You could feel the room shift from adversarial to human. The formalities dropped away for a moment. What began as legal proceeding became something more, a raw human confrontation with error, with consequence, with redemption. And yet the conflict remained. Michael had still committed the wrongdoing. The state still demanded accountability. The public still expected a conventional decision. The question now was, would the letter change anything? Would the judge allow it to alter the meaning of justice in that moment? Would the courtroom accept that someone, despite a serious error, could rise and ask, "Let me make this right"? As the letter wound to its end, Michael offered no guarantee of perfection, only promise of effort. He wrote that he accepted the outcome, whatever the court decided, but asked that the decision leave open the possibility of reconciliation, of restoration. The courtroom remained silent. The judge folded the paper and leaned back, and just when you thought you had grasped the full story, the final sentence dropped like a stone. Michael disclosed that he had found the very person he had wronged, sought forgiveness, and that person had agreed, conditionally, to meet him for the first time in years, only if the court recognized his efforts. That admission raised new questions. What relevance did that meeting hold? Would the court see it as manipulation or genuine? Did the prosecutor care? Would the public? Friends, at this moment the story isn't static, it's alive. The secret is revealed, the conflict escalated, and our emotional compass is spinning. We now ask, what will happen next in this courtroom charged with expectation and humanity? The atmosphere was electric, but hushed.
Michael's family in the gallery nodded quietly, tears glinting. His daughter held her mother's hand tightly, glancing at her father with hope. The world outside could wait, and inside this room time had stretched. The judge resumed, "I will impose a sentence. That decision will reflect accountability, but it will also acknowledge that you have shown courage. This is not leniency because you are innocent. It is recognition that someone is more than their error." The echoes of that phrase lingered. At that moment, I want you, dear viewer, to imagine the weight on Michael's shoulders. Imagine the letter's scripts, the trembling lines, the confession. Imagine the eyes in the courtroom fixed on him. Imagine the hairs standing on the back of your own neck as you realize the depth of what's happening. Because in that courtroom, humanity met justice head on. And then the judge paused again. He looked at the letter in his hand, then back at Michael. "The court will suspend a portion of your sentence on the condition that you complete the community service described in your letter, maintain your employment, and attend the counseling sessions you outlined. Should you falter, the full sentence will come into effect." A collective breath held, then let go. The audience nodded slowly. The gravity of conditional hope filled the room. The emotional climax was not simply the sentencing. It was the moment when the courtroom ceased being a performance and became a living space of reckoning and repair. The judge's words rippled outward, justice not as vengeance but as possibility. The courtroom's silence did not signal emptiness, but transformation. We saw the defendant not as a statistic, but as a human being rising from his own mistakes. You may ask, did the letter make a difference? Yes, it opened a door. It didn't guarantee freedom, but it opened the possibility of restoration. And when the judge pronounced those words, the whole court changed tone. The prosecutor's posture shifted, the gallery's energy altered, the defendant's world tilted. Friends, if you've ever felt defined by your mistakes, take a moment to reflect on this scene. Because the climax here teaches something vital. It's never just about what you did, it's about how you respond. And sometimes, one authentic letter is enough to make a courtroom pause. The gavel finally came down. Judge Caprio's voice sealed the moment. "Let the record show the court's decision. The defendant is hereby sentenced to 12 months, of which 6 months are to be served and 6 months are suspended on the conditions outlined. The defendant shall also perform 200 hours of community service, pay restitution in the amount indicated, and attend the counseling sessions he described in his letter. Failure to comply will result in full enforcement of the original sentence." A hush followed. In that instant, the courtroom balanced relief and consequence. Michael exhaled. Shoulders sagged. His daughter reached forward to hug his hand. The prosecutor arose, shook hands with the defense attorney, and offered a nod of respect to the judge. The gallery watched, some wiping tears, others silent, all changed. The sentence held accountability, unmistakably, but it also held a bridge, a suspended half, a community service requirement, a chance at redemption. Why did the judge choose this path? Because the letter had illuminated something rare: true remorse, personal transformation, and a clear roadmap to repair. The legal world doesn't always pause for that, but this one did. And the decision reflects a view of justice that includes healing, not just punishment. As Michael stood and collected his things, the real work began. Community service, seeing people he wronged, meeting his daughter as a renewed father. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed, reporters scribbled notes. But the deeper story was quieter. A father willing to rebuild. Justice fulfilled, but with space for hope. And so the resolution. The courtroom emptied. The judge exited. The attorneys packed their files. Michael left slowly, guided by defense counsel, his family waiting outside. The letter stayed in the court files, yet its ripple extended far beyond. The moment of silence, the shift in posture, the remission of part of the sentence, all stemmed from that one heartfelt page. This final decision doesn't erase the past. It holds it. It acknowledges it. It imposes consequence, but it also empowers a future. The message for all of us, in moments when you're on the precipice of your worst decision, your next move can define you. It may not absolve you, but it can give you direction. Friends, you might wonder, does this happen often? No, but it can happen when someone dares to face their mistake, to articulate their remorse, and to offer a plan for repair. The judge's final decision illustrates that justice can be firm and compassionate at once. That's the meaning of this case. Now, as we close this chapter, I want you to carry this image: a courtroom gone silent, a judge reading a letter, a defendant standing in a fragile hope. Because such moments remind us that behind every case is a human life. Behind every judgment, a possibility. Behind every sentence, a next chapter. And speaking of next chapters, there's more. In our next episode, we will explore a similar hearing, where a letter changed the outcome, but in a very different way. Different judge, different defendant, different stakes, but the same question: can words rewrite fate? So make sure you're ready for that story. But before we go, let's reflect together. Friends, this story of Judge Caprio reading a plea, witnessing a man's remorse, and the whole court pausing, it is not just a legal anecdote. It is a mirror for our own lives. We all carry letters inside us, unspoken regrets, hidden stories, voices yearning to be heard. Maybe you feel defined by a mistake, by a failure, by someone's expectation you failed to meet. This courtroom moment shows us you are more than your worst decision.
If you've ever stood in your own figurative defendant seat, heart-pounding, world-judging, you might imagine what it is like to hand over a letter of truth and hope, to ask, "Will you see me?" This story says yes, one judge did, and maybe someone can in your life too. But first you must write your letter, your truth, your intention to repair, and then you must stand. I invite you now, reflect in the comments. Tell us, have you ever started a letter or a conversation you feared? What did you hope it would accomplish? Has someone read it? Was the room changed? Share if this story touched your heart. And if you know someone who's ever needed a chance to be seen, share this video with them. Sometimes a story like this reminds us all that redemption is possible. If you're here for more stories of justice, humanity, transformation, hit the subscribe button and ring that notification bell, because next time we go deeper into the courtroom, deeper into lives that reflect our own hidden battles. You don't want to miss the reveal we promised. The next episode's hearing, the letter that challenged an entire courtroom in the opposite direction. Will it lead to mercy? Or will it lead to a decision that shocks us all? We'll find out together. In closing, remember this: justice is not only what happens in courtrooms, it's what happens in hearts. When you face your truth, when you step. The judge clears his throat, the words trembling slightly as he begins to read the next part of the letter. "I haven't been the best mother," he reads softly. "I missed school meetings, I missed birthdays. But every time I looked at my son sleeping, I promised him that one day things would get better. I just didn't know how soon the world would test that promise." The entire courtroom is still. No rustling, no coughs, not even the faint hum of air conditioning can be heard. Judge Caprio looks up briefly, his eyes scanning the room before lowering them again to the paper in his hand. "Last month," he continues, "I lost my job. Then 2 weeks later, my landlord told me I had to leave.
I packed everything into my car. That car, Your Honor, is where my son and I have been living." The audience exhales as one. The sound is quiet but heavy. You can feel the shock spreading across the benches. The camera would linger on Judge Caprio's face here, every wrinkle carrying the weight of decades of stories just like this one, but this one feels different. You can sense he's fighting back emotion, holding on to the dignity of his position while the words claw at his heart. "I didn't come here to make excuses," the letter continues. "I came here because I believe in fairness. I came here because I tell my son that good people still exist." Friends, think about that line for a moment. How many of us hold on to hope that somewhere out there, someone still believes in fairness? The courtroom isn't just quiet, it's transformed. Everyone is waiting, not for punishment or forgiveness, but for understanding. Judge Caprio pauses. "This young woman," he says softly, folding the letter slightly. "She isn't asking for pity. She's asking to be seen." He looks over at her, sitting nervously, clutching her hands. Her face is pale, but her eyes, tired yet unwavering, meet his. "You said you were living in your car," the judge says gently. She nods. "Yes, Your Honor. It's not forever. I'm saving. I just needed more time." The silence stretches again, not uncomfortable, but profound. Viewers at home can feel their throats tighten. Every person watching knows this moment will stay with them long after the video ends. Judge Caprio leans back, resting his chin on his hand. "When you were driving to that parking lot, the one where you got the ticket, where were you going?" The woman hesitates. "To the community kitchen, Your Honor. I volunteer there sometimes, and they give me meals for my son." The judge blinks, almost imperceptibly. He repeats her words under his breath. "You volunteer there," as if to make sure he heard right. The bailiff looks down. Even he seems affected. At that moment, a subtle shift happens. The audience isn't watching a courtroom anymore. They're witnessing humanity unfold in real time. The judge, the woman, the spectators, all boundaries of role and title disappear, replaced by the shared pulse of compassion. Judge Caprio picks up the letter again. "She ends with this," he says quietly. "If you find it in your heart to forgive my mistake, I promise I'll spend every day teaching my son that kindness is stronger than circumstance." His voice breaks just a little on that last word. And then, complete silence. Even the people watching online later through a screen would swear they felt that silence like a heartbeat. The judge sits for a moment, collecting himself. His next words come slow, deliberate, like he's carving them into time. "Ma'am," he begins, "the law says you owe this fine. But sometimes justice is about more than rules. It's about mercy." The woman starts to tremble. Her lips part slightly, as if to speak, but no words come out. "I want you to know," the judge continues, "you're not invisible. You've done something most people wouldn't. You came here, you told the truth, and you've tried, despite everything, to do the right thing." He glances again at the letter. "And that means something to me." The woman's son, who has been sitting quietly beside her, shifts in his seat. He can't be more than 8 years old. His small voice breaks the silence. "Thank you, sir." The courtroom melts. You can see people wipe their eyes. Even the cameraman, trying to hold steady, sniffles once. Judge Caprio smiles faintly. "Young man," he says, "you've got a good mom. Don't you ever forget that." The boy nods solemnly. "Yes, sir." And then, with a soft sigh, he makes his decision. Case dismissed. "And ma'am, I want you to take this money." He gestures to an envelope the clerk hands him. "It's from the court's discretionary fund. Use it for gas, for food, for whatever you and your son need. You don't owe this court anything." The woman covers her mouth, overwhelmed. Her shoulders shake. She tries to speak but breaks into tears. Judge Caprio gives a reassuring nod. "It's okay," he says gently. "You've carried enough. Let us carry this one." For a moment, time freezes. Every person in that room, every viewer at home, feels something ignite, a mix of hope, relief, and a deep reminder that compassion still exists. Friends, this isn't just a story about a parking ticket. It's a story about what happens when justice listens, when hearts open, when kindness becomes louder than judgment. The judge leans forward again, resting his elbows on the bench. You know, my father used to tell me that everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Maybe that's what this courtroom is for, not to punish, but to understand. The audience murmurs softly a collective agreement as the woman wipes her tears and smiles through them. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you for believing me. Judge Caprio smiles back. No, he replies quietly. Thank you for reminding me why I do this. As the woman and her son gather their things and prepare to leave, the camera follows them out. The boy holds his mother's hand tightly, and just before the door closes behind them, he looks back and waves at the judge. Caprio waves back, his eyes glistening. The bailiff leans over. Judge, he says softly, are you all right? Caprio chuckles faintly. I'm fine, Frank. Just thinking about how one letter can change your day. The scene fades for a moment, but then, just when you think it's over, there's one last image. The judge sitting alone in his chambers later that day, holding the same letter. He's reading it again, slower this time. The sound of traffic hums faintly in the background, but his focus is entirely on those words. Kindness is stronger than circumstance. He folds the letter carefully, places it in a drawer with a few others, and closes it gently. Another reminder, he whispers. The narrator's voice cuts in, calm yet charged with emotion. In a world where so many rush to judge, one man continues to remind us that every story deserves to be heard. Maybe that's why millions tune in, not just to see justice, but to feel it. Friends, if this story touched your heart, tell us in the comments. What would you have done if you were in Judge Caprio's place? Would you have made the same decision? And if you believe that compassion still matters, share this story. Let someone out there remember that even in the hardest times, one act of understanding can change everything. The narrator's voice softens further. Because sometimes the real verdict isn't written in courtrooms. It's written in kindness. As the video begins to fade out, we hear one last piece of dialogue from the judge, almost like an echo through time. Justice without compassion is not justice, it's just order. And we need more than order. We need heart. The narrator returns, offering a small hint of what's next. In our next story, a young father walks into Judge Caprio's courtroom with a secret so unexpected, even the judge couldn't hold back his tears. You won't believe what happens when he reveals it. Fade to black. Title card appears, Caught in Providence, True Justice, True Humanity. And as the music swells, the final words linger on screen. Be kind, always.